Welcome to GTM. Today I'm going to discuss the Seneca Dragonfly Mark II and the Benjamin 397S. These are two guns that I've had on the channel for quite a while, and I haven't done a huge amount for content with this one right here, and I think it's probably time to do a little bit of an update. I get a lot of questions. A lot of people are very interested to know what happened with the Benjamin. Is it good? Is it bad? Are you continuing to use it? Well, it's still here, obviously, right here. And I just want to discuss these two a little bit, some pros and cons, and then something that I prefer, which is in this bag right here. I'll talk about that towards the end. If you hang around, there's going to be some discount codes. I should talk about a couple items and also some links to other products. So Buckrail is a company that I'm really happy to work with. Obviously, I use their stuff. It's my favorite. I have an adapter on here for this Benjamin. Makes it just really, really cool. Very, very quiet. I have a couple of barrel clamps on here for accessories. Sometimes I put a flashlight or a laser or something else up here. And so Buckrail is a company I'm going to be plugging in this video quite a bit. And normally there would be a Buckrail can here as well. I have a number of Buckrail items. Again, at the end of the video, I'll discuss that a little bit more with my third option, which I kind of recommend over these two for certain applications. So first of all, this is the one I've had the longest and probably have the most pellets through. And I'm just going to go from this end to the can, the other end, and discuss a little bit about it. First of all, in the stock, there's a couple holes here because I used to have a cheek riser in it, and this is already a high comb stock. The iron sights that came with it, I did take those off. I went ahead and added this adapter here so I could put some degree of Picatinny. Unfortunately, this is like a Weaver Picatinny combo and dovetail combo, and it only has a few slots for Picatinny. It's really frustrating to me that generally in the airgun groups community that there's just not much for understanding about how optics work, what are good optics, and so it limits the platforms really badly. It's something that irks me. But anyways, I added this on, and so I was going with an optic, and then I would have a riser on this cheek piece here. I removed that for now because I'm just running a red dot, and these two work well enough together. Length of pull tends to be just a tad short, just a little bit short when I'm running an optic, so I just cantilever my optic a little forward, and I don't worry too much about length of pull. It does fine with that. This synthetic stock, I think a wood stock would make it better because the trigger weight is so unbelievably bad and heavy. Just giving this gun more weight would probably make the trigger pull not so bad. It'd also help with just muting the rifle a little bit, but I don't mind the synthetic terribly. I think the synthetic stock has some advantages. It doesn't weather badly, and it gets rained on and those kind of things. I don't mind. I don't really have to do too much for maintenance, and so there's some positives with it. Moving over to the trigger, I have installed, and you're probably not going to be able to see it real well, guys. I've installed a screw and a spring in here to help not so much with the trigger weight as the reset. I took out a spring internally. I damaged something a little bit, and I just put this spring in here to help with over travel. And so it was bad for the over travel. It's already bad for creep. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and ghost it real quick here. So this trigger, in fact, I think I'll go this way. I'm going to take the safety off, that helps. This trigger is probably like 8 pounds at least. There's creep, 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 more creep, more creep, more creep, and an indiscernible break, really. It comes up to a point. At this point, I can tell when it's going to break, but it is just, to be honest with you, it's garbage. It's a bad trigger. Even the shape of the trigger I don't like, but it is a metal trigger. That's one positive, and I'm looking for positives that I can throw out. By the way, this is a 177. All the guns you're going to be seeing today are 177. I pretty much stick to that for caliber. The bolt itself is fine. I haven't worn out any seals just yet. I have a CV Life red dot on there right now, and it does pretty well set up this way. There's a barricade pad underneath because I do use this sometimes for practicing like kind of NRL 22 stages PRS stuff. believe it or not, I'll use this system, and it's been fun. I added a little Picatinny underneath because sometimes I'll put a bipod on there, and then sometimes I'll actually clamp it into a tripod like this one over here. So I add a little piece of Picatinny there, and it's okay. The underside, I have a little bit of quieting Velcro. So I put that on there so it's not so loud when you pump it, because it is kind of a noisy pumping action. Again, I have buck rail additions here on the barrel clamp. You could put a red dot or something like that on these. If you didn't go ahead and replace the breech, you could do a buck rail set of clamps up there for some sort of optics. That would probably work real good, considering that this barrel is mounted to the air tank or the container, compression tube, whatever this is called, underneath. You could probably do that and get away with it, and these wouldn't move too much on you. I use this for accessories like lights or lasers. Moving on down, I don't remember who made this converter. I think I got it off eBay. It's just a converter that threads into this buck rail right here can. And this LEDC, man, it is very effective. This is one that you can customize, and so you kind of decide for yourself how much clearance you need, how much quietness you need, and I get as close as I can on some of these cans to keep the sound and the report down. And this thing, which was already quiet, it's a multi-pump gun, it's really, really quiet now. I'm really happy with that part of the rifle, but dissatisfied with the design of that rifle overall. I think it could have been and should have been so much more. This is newer to me. I don't have as many videos out on this right now. Not a lot of modification. Can't do a lot of modification to this yet because it is newer. Hoping that my friend over at Buck Rail, if Terry comes up with some ideas, maybe there's a couple cool things you could do. I don't know. I got to talk to him about that sometime. So starting off on the end, length of pull is set up, I think, for a child. This rifle has a very short stock. It does have that European sweep. It's kind of a drop down, and then there's, I guess that's a cheek riser right there. But the iron sights it comes with, it was even too low, in my opinion, for the iron sights on the Dragonfly Mark II here. Just not impressed with that. It is a nice quality wood, I'll tell you that. I do think the grain all the way through, I don't know if that's beechwood or what that is, it's a really nice grain. Looks good. Very clean. The stock was very clean on the exterior. The interior cuts inside are not cleaned out. It was not sanded inside. It's very rough looking. I've never taken it out because you can't modify the trigger on these very well at all. So there's no reason to take it out of the stock or chassis. But this portion right here, yep, too low, not long enough for most people. It'd be fine for a child, like a 10-year-old, I'm sure, or somebody who's 5'3", you know. Just not enough, in my opinion. Has some checkering here. The pistol grip, again, this is preference. And so I understand a lot of people who shoot pellet rifles are not like real serious gun shooters, perhaps. They don't try other things. But this right here, this pistol grip is just weak, man. If you're going to be shooting this from a bench, it's probably fine for hunting. If that's all you're ever going to do with this, it's probably fine. I think that this should have been a more aggressive pistol grip. I think just the design of the stock is just very old. It's classic, I guess you could call it that. There's enough classic designs out there. I wish that they had modernized this a little bit, considering it has other features which are considered modern. There's some checkering here. You have a plastic housing underneath. That's tacky, I'm going to say. The safety works really well. It's a nice safety, good and tactile. The trigger itself is not as bad as the Benjamin, okay? The Benjamin is atrocious. It is probably one of the worst triggers I've ever had on an Airgun. I can't believe I kept this thing and worked with it for so long and tried to learn it. This one is not that bad, but it's definitely not good. This is not a good trigger. A couple people online said, yeah, it's a pretty decent trigger. No, it's not. I don't know where people get that information or that opinion from, or what they're comparing it against. Maybe the other bad airgun triggers, maybe this is good compared to the bad ones, but it's not a good trigger. It's not terribly heavy, and I forgot my trigger gauge in the next room, but I think mine right now is somewhere around 4 pounds. I've had worse. Obviously, the Benjamin is worse. But it's not good. It has plenty of creep in it. I'm going to go ahead and dry fire that as well. Take the safety off. You're going to go ahead and pull. You'll get some creep. There's a couple walls in there, and it kind of like does that thing. but you know it's coming after you shoot it a few times, and then you finally get up to that next, okay, more creep, another wall, another creep, another wall, another creep, and another wall. I'm not kidding. Another creep and another wall. And finally, the last one, and it breaks. I'm glad the trigger weight isn't more, because I would have returned this gun. That is such a creepy trigger. It's just not good, guys. It's really disappointing that guns are coming out, modern guns are coming out with such bad triggers. And don't tell me it's the insurance, because it's not. That's just an old thing that people used to say. The rail right here is only dovetail. It's not Picatinny. Again, disappointing, extremely disappointing. And I bought that knowing it, by the way. I did know that. I just still think it's disappointing. The fact that this portion right here can only fit these weird short eye relief scopes, and that they didn't extend it out at least up to here. And in fact, this barrel band where your iron sight, your rear iron sight would sit, it can't even mount on that. This is a different height than the rail is. And so you always end up doing something kind of funky with stuff like this. Usually I use cantilever forward, optics mounts, and I think I have some Eagle Vision ones. There's a couple others that can cantilever forward. And I'm using, you know, I think it's not like a high-end optic, but maybe a little bit more high-end than some of the other companies out there that are Airgun specific. It's not a Hawk optic, you know. It's a little bit better, and it does have a little bit shorter eye relief, so I can get away with it. This is a 5-30 Add-A-Ball. I do have a review on this already. Center fires, rim fires, all that kind of stuff. Goes down to about 25 yards. I don't shoot this rifle typically closer than 25 yards. I do sometimes take squirrels at like 10 or 15 yards. I just have to back off the magnification. Anyways, big disappointment there. It does have a multi-shot magazine as well. Apparently it's the same as some of the Diana ones. That is cool, and I've used it a few times. I prefer the single shot tray a lot of times. Moving on down, like I said, there's a barrel band here. That actually seems like a decent design, the way that they went about that. Inside, you have this real interesting system where it does not pump pressure unless the hammer is all the way back, unless it's cocked. So right now, this doesn't do anything. It just releases air. But it's got another arm in there, if you can see that. I'll move off to the side. It's got another arm in there, and so the pressure when you're pumping, it stays the same every time. And so the amount of force it takes to pump the gun up to 15 times, it stays the same. It doesn't build pressure kind of like these old 10 pumps did. So they get harder to pump, you know, as you get going. This one does not have that problem. It stays the same as you pump. And it is really nice. It does have a couple finger grooves, I guess you could call it here, but it's a nice long forearm. And does not come with a Picatinny piece or a bipod. That's something I added right there. That's, again, a CV Life carbon fiber tripod, or a bipod rather. And I do have a review out on that as well. I added the Picatinny just because sometimes I like to shoot it this way. Most of the time, actually. But that being said, nice long forearm here. I think this is good. This was a good design, and it makes sense. It does not meet up very nice back here. I think this right here is not ideal, how that meets up. Again, I have just a little bit of a barricade pad there. Since it's a multi-shot, I do like to use this for practice, especially when it's warm outside, for NRL 22, and I can do it, you know, in a backyard for the obvious reasons. This one does not have a barrel that is connected to the chamber here, or the compression chamber, whatever this is called. That's fine for me because the barrel band has a little bit of offset and it holds it together. The actual chamber and this block back here, that holds the barrel in a little bit. And then up here, you have a plastic piece. I don't know why they went with plastic for this. That's not ideal, but it works. It holds the barrel in place. I don't think there's any twisting going on with that barrel at all. It seems very, very rigid, solid. Pretty happy with the actual quality of the barrel itself. There is a fiber optic sight that, you know, if you're gonna use the irons, great. I can't use irons as well as a lot of people. I think my vision is just not set up for it as well, although I shoot irons on pistols and I do well, so I don't know. Then I have this on here. This is not from Buck-Rail. This is from another company. I don't particularly recommend this one. I prefer the Buck-Rail ones. I just happen to have this one on instead of the other one tonight. I was doing a little testing between the two to see if there was point of impact shift. So that's kind of a breakdown of the two rifles. I will say this. Offhand, I can still do decently with this. Even though it has a really bad, terrible, awful, horrible trigger, I can still do decently with this, and it's fun. I'll use it out to, let's see, that's 85 yards over there. I'll use it out to 85 yards on different size targets just for fun on like a 10-inch target at 85 yards, and then smaller and smaller as it comes in. And with the red dot especially, you know, it's a plinking gun. I'll shoot squirrels with it really close. And that's probably the best benefit of this. At 8 pumps, I do think this one slaps pretty good considering it's a 10 pump. Ergonomically, it's a little bit comfortable. I think having that higher cheek piece in the comb, that makes me happy. And I can do different things with it. Like I said, I can put a light up here, and if I'm going to shoot stuff at night, you know, I don't do ratting like some people do, but other critters. I do like this one a lot. I like being able to throw a red dot on there or an optica scope and kind of make it work. It's just that bad trigger that is so upsetting. Good barrel though, it does seem to have a good barrel. When I really practice and I get it down, that Benjamin can shoot nice groups. As can the Seneca. The Seneca can really shoot nice groups if I work that trigger over and over and over and over and get it exactly predictable. It can shoot nice groups. But between the two of them, I prefer the Seneca. And it was kind of a hard pick when I was trying to make up my mind. I think the Seneca is just not as bad as a lot of the things that are going on here. I mean, namely the trigger. The trigger is just so easy to mess it up and pull shots. It's so heavy. I can't imagine a kid having a good time with a trigger that heavy and stiff and unpredictable, that much over travel. This one is at least slightly better. It did come from the factory in a way where I could mount up an optic and the barrel is fixed, and it also is threaded. And so I like that quite a bit. In fact, it's got 2 thread pitches on here. You can look that up if you're interested. I think that's cool. It's a little bit more modern. I can pump it 15 times. I can shoot it with as low as 3 pumps and get decent accuracy. Between the two of them, for decent accuracy and getting that pellet out of the barrel with speed, I think this one, around 6 pumps for the Benjamin, is the minimum that I do to get reasonable accuracy. If I'm going to kill something, I'll just go 8 pumps and probably not less ever. It's still pretty quiet, by the way, at 8 pumps with that LDC device on the end. The Seneca, it's extremely quiet. I think the longer barrel helps here. It's extremely quiet. It's quieter than the Benjamin is. It is maybe a little bit more accurate or precise, and I feel I can be more accurate with it is really the thing. I like the pump arm a little better. The fact that the pressure is the same, or the amount of force exerted to pump is the same. I feel like there's more options for pumping power and strength. I basically only go between three pumping amounts. I'll do 3, 10, or 15. And so if I'm doing 3, it's because I'm practicing close range, like 30 yards and in, and I want to practice cranking on the turrets, and distances for that is just hitting steel targets. If I'm going to shoot paper for like groups, if I'm trying to shoot groups and see how well I can do with that stagey trigger, I will usually do 10 pumps for that. And then if I'm shooting pretty far, like I've shot this past 150 yards, believe it or not, and when I'm shooting that far, I always go to 15, and I use the heaviest pellet that reliably feeds and shoots out of this thing. And so that's kind of how I have them set up, and that's how I shoot them. This is the one I prefer out of the two of them. But here's my thing, and I know I'm going to probably make a lot of people mad who are just airgun fanatics. I'm just not impressed. I'm really not. I'm not that impressed with either of these. You have to do a lot. I'm so thankful that companies like Buck-Rail exist, because you can make the airgun what it should have been from the factory. I just don't understand how stuff like this is leaving the factory and selling, and year after year there's these minor incremental improvements, and there's just not much. There's really not much. SHOT Show's coming up pretty soon. I was supposed to go to SHOT Show, kind of couldn't make it this year last second, but I hope that something better comes out. I hope that they come up with like a modern version of something like this. All they would have to do, Seneca, if you're watching this, I don't hate you, and I'm probably offending somebody, but I'm not really trying to. I'm just disappointed in this build. It should have been a pistol grip. There should have been a modern design. It'd be so easy for you to come up with something that looks a little bit more like some of your PCPs. I saw one of the PCP companies came out with what looks like a long-range version of a PCP this year, and that's going to sell great. It's going to do really well. These still sell, and people will still buy them, and you'll still get people like myself who will try them out hoping it's better. But year after year, it's just kind of a disappointment. And a lot of it comes down to if they just change the trigger, give us a better optics situation, a better stock. You know, a pistol grip would be ideal. And the magazine is good enough. You could just keep going with that. Did a great job here. I think that's usually what the thing is that frustrates me. But let me show you what I recommend above the two of these. And check this out, this is the important difference here. If you don't need killing power beyond 25 yards, and you're gonna shoot relatively close, relatively often, if you're doing accuracy out to about 50, 60 yards, and that's all you care about, just shooting targets, then I'm gonna put these aside and show you what's in this backpack and why I prefer this most of the time. All right, so inside of this little mini backpack, I have a very mini air rifle, and it's kind of my preferred air rifle. Again, inside of those designations, you're not hunting too far away, or you're just doing target practice out to around 50 yards. This is a Crosman 1377. Believe it or not, this is a 1377 right here, and I prefer this pretty much every time if it's just those tasks that I'm doing. It's a little bit modified. A lot of you know that the 1377 is a pistol traditionally, and this one looks a little different. Again, the company I'm talking about is Buckrail. Buckrail makes so much stuff that can improve, you know, just the experience of using these and just make it more fun. I just think these are way more fun to use because Buckrail exists, and they're also extremely, extremely quiet, extremely accurate, like way more accurate than the other two rifles I had on the table. Very customizable, and I can work on them myself. They're easy. I don't really need to send it in or anything. I can do it all on my own. So I'll just start with this one, kind of from the stock to the can. In fact, okay, I've got two of them. Probably talk about both of them. So this right here, this device is the Buckrail Poor Man's Folder. And that right there is so cool. I had wanted a folder for one of these for so long because I wanted it to be a little backpacking gun. This is a tiny backpack, by the way, especially for a big guy like me. It's a tiny backpack, and this whole thing with the optic and this big height here, it fits in there. That's really cool. So the Poor Man's Folder right there, and then this is the buffer tube option that allows for length of pull adjustment. I also have kind of a minimalist 3D printed one that is his in-house production. That one's cool. I don't have that mounted up right now. I thought about maybe mounting up on this one in the future if I get some more parts. But right now, this is how I've been running it, and I love this one. I've had thousands of pellets through this, and it's done so well. I've turned this back and forth thousands of times, and the arm, the folder itself, reliable, very tight. The actual folding mechanism itself is super reliable. The only thing that's loose is the Magpul stock, and that's just Magpul stocks in general. But that's cool, easy to install. Moving on down, I just have the regular pistol grips on here right now. And then I have the Plumper Pumper right here underneath. And basically it does what that would do. It's a Plumper Pumper. It gives you more to grip and hold on to. There's some texture on there. I like it matches the new cans that he's been making over there at Buckrail. And so that's cool that that matches up. I put a piece of Picatinny underneath. I think I took an Atlas edition or something like that. I took that out of there. It was a spare part I had. Just flattened out a piece underneath, sanded it down, and then installed that underneath. This right here is getting worn, but it's still not worn out. The bolt and the rail is the Crosman version of that. I'm not sure why they don't sell the gun with this, but they sell it with a plastic part that's undesirable. It also comes with a relatively heavy trigger, but you can go look it up online, but there are ways to modify that. It's really not hard, didn't cost me a single penny, and that's a good trigger. That trigger is under 2 pounds. I modified it myself until it was within reason. I couldn't go much lighter and have consistency, so I left it around 2 pounds right now. I like it a lot though, and I've been able to get really good groups. I'm going to show you some in a little bit here. On top of that, I can't remember who's making this rail, but I just had an idea about something. It's probably a little ridiculous, but I wanted a full length rail basically, and I planned to put a red dot on here and then use the full length rail for some other things like lights, like this light I have on the side here. I have an O light, and that O light is real comfortable. It's in the right spot. Anyways, that rail right there, I'll probably leave on there. I think it's cool. And if I sell this USO, which I probably will, this is US Optics 3-12. If I sell that, I may go with a Premier Arms Cyclops or one of the other vendors that I work with. Not sure yet what I'm going to do for that, but it meets up well with this O light on the end. Again, if I'm doing critters real close, even at nighttime, this has plenty of power. It actually has a considerable amount of power, even compared to the other guns that were just on the table, if you go to 10 pumps. And I'm pretty happy with that. It's also quieter. I do have a buck rail adapter on the end here, and so that I can put this LDC device on there. And that's just so that I don't bother people, I don't scare away the critters I'm hunting. It's very, very effective. This thing is so quiet that several times, if I haven't shot it for a week or two, I take it out, I pump it up several times, I take a shot. The first reaction you have is you kind of worry that the gun didn't shoot air out. And especially if you're shooting a long ways. And if you can't hear that pellet impact, if it's just quiet, you're shooting into something that's quiet, it feels like no pellet came out, but it did. It's that quiet, guys. It's shockingly quiet. Anyways, that's another buck rail piece of gear here and here. Really happy with that. This is just more accurate. It's smaller. It's a smaller package. I like it better. I think it looks cooler. It has a couple modern features on it. Obviously, I was the one who put the modern features on it, but it can do it. And a lot of other guns, you just can't do that kind of stuff. So these are cool. I like them a lot because of that. Again, a couple buck rail things on here. I put the same Crosman bolt and rail on right there because I needed to be able to put an optic on. I'm running an Addaball. This is their 1-12, and I do have a video about this in particular. It has parallax that can go down to 10 yards, and it's kind of ridiculous to have this high quality of an optic probably on one of these, except for the rifle shoots really well. It just does really, really good, and so I wanted to put a good quality optic on there. Since I don't shoot it beyond probably 100 yards, I didn't need to have a larger optic with a big bell on it. A 1-12 was just fine, and this one is obviously excellent, especially because it has side parallax and really nice crispy turrets, like if I lift to operate. So that's cool. So I can dial out to different locations, has a nice reticle holdover, center dot. Cool optic, have a video about that. The buck rail, let's see, the buck rail buffer on here. This one is fixed, it's not a folder. I like that quite a bit. I do have a plumper pumper on here and an adapter for a can. I have one of their older cans in the bag. And this package right here shoots really, really nice. It's still very small. It's actually the same size if I have the can on this one. And they both fit in an Eberly stock switchback, but when I take the can off, this one is smaller. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about some targets that are disappointing, I'm going to say. So it's been a couple weeks, at least 2 weeks since I've shot any air guns. Just got busy and work, and I had other things to do. And since I was out of practice, I was like, hey, I'm going to shoot all 3 of these types just cold bore around 10 shots, something like that at 50 yards. And I'm gonna see what kind of groups I get just jumping in. How easy is it to grab the gun and get right back to where I was? And so I did, let's see, with a Benjamin first. This is at 50 yards. It's not amazing. That was the best I could pull out. That is probably a 2.6 inch group. I think it's a little over 10 shots actually. Not super impressive. It's enough for a squirrel. It's probably enough power for a squirrel, a little closer than that. Can hit pop cans and little targets like that, but it's just real all over the place. And most of that is the trigger. I think the pressure is consistent. I think the barrel's good. The pellets I was using were decent. It's that trigger. It's so hard to be consistent with that. And so I just have a little bit of a shotgun pattern going on. For a lot of people, they're gonna be super happy with that at 50 yards for a multi-pump. And because I know they can do better, and there's just simple fixes, I'm not content with that. So it doesn't do it for me. Moving on, this is the Dragonfly Mark II. And so this one, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did 8 shots. It's a little better. It's a little better than this. I think I did fewer shots too. But it's just taking some shots to see how I did. And the 0 is decent. I was able to remain where I should have been, but not really that impressive. It's still a little scattered, you know. A couple of them wound up in the same hole, but it's just not predictable enough. I'm not really happy with that. I want to see sub 1 inch or at least 1 inch. And here is the little pistol at 10 pumps. This is the 1377. And initially it looks like it might be just a little scattered because there's 1, 2, 3 right here, but there's 7 shots. No, 8, sorry. There's 8 shots in this little pattern up here. 8 shots. So there are a couple flyers in there, but even so, it's just barely bigger than a group, even with the flyers. And those could have been trigger pull for me or changing pressure as I warmed up the pump arm. But that right there just tells me I don't feel like messing around with some of these other ones quite as much, okay? Not quite as much. They have a purpose. I kind of like doing the long range thing with this one. It's kind of fun just to try it out. It's a little bit of a hobby, but there's so much work that goes into these. And I would rather just be able to pick up a gun that just shoots well, something that I can easily modify, can work on myself. All these buck rail parts made this just a superior gun as a whole. So I'm gonna tell you guys, head over to Buck Rail and purchase yourself either a Crosman 1377 or maybe one of the variants, something like that. But he's got a lot of materials on the site to improve your air guns and just make them more fun in general, maybe more accurate, maybe more reliable, more packable. And that's what my experience was, is that it just improved my desire to shoot this one because I could do so much with it. That's all I have for you today, guys. I don't really like doing talking videos all that much. I'd rather use them and show you how I'm using them. And that's what I'm gonna do in my next series of videos. I'm gonna show you more stuff from Buck Rail, what I'm doing with them, try to give you a little bit more of an idea of why they improve air guns so much. In the meantime, head over to Buck Rail, check out some stuff. Use my links down below if you're interested in those things. I'm gonna recommend right now, if you don't have a Crosman 1377, that's the first one to build and work on, and probably use those links as well. Get all that stuff at the same time so you can make it what it is supposed to be and enjoy your air guns.